Joey Logano and Ty Gibbs were not happy with each other after the Bushlike clash. NASCAR might be headed to Mexico and Mexico City in 2025, and Auto Club will not be returning in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. Let's first go ahead and take a look at a couple paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Cesar Baccarella's 2024 Prime Bite scheme that we'll see at Daytona in about 2 weeks. This looks really good in my opinion. Alpha Prime Racing always has really solid paint schemes. This one's no exception. I'm really excited to see that this 45 car will be out on the racetrack in 2024. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tony Breidinger's 2024 Celsius scheme for Daytona. This looks awesome in my opinion. I think this is better than Corey LaJoie's and AJ Allmendinger's. No disrespect to both those guys. I think it's a really good opportunity for her, and I think the paint scheme looks really good in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ross Chastain's 2024 Kubota scheme. I love this scheme. This is definitely my favorite Kubota scheme that we've seen from Ross Chastain in the last couple years. I love the darker orange color. I think it looks really solid, and I'm looking forward to see it on the racetrack in 2024. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Suarez's 2024 Freeway Insurance scheme. There's no changes to this scheme basically from the last 2 years. I've kind of liked the Freeway Insurance schemes. They do a good job utilizing a sponsorship placement, among other things. I think it looks solid, and I'm definitely looking forward to see this paint scheme on the racetrack throughout the 2024 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Workforce. As it was announced on Friday afternoon that Workforce will sponsor Zane Smith in 2024 on a multi-year deal. Now, they're not going to be a main sponsor. They are going to be an associate sponsor. This is another big sponsorship deal that Zane Smith has picked up over the course of the last couple months. Obviously, he's going to have Focus Health for around 20 races, including when he just ran at the Bushlike Clash. And it's really good to see Zane Smith continues to bring sponsorship and funding with him over to Spire Motorsports this season. There's a lot of hype around him, and I think it's really exciting to see the Workforce is going to be working with him in the 2024 season. I think that looks really exciting to see that Workforce will be working with them in the 2024 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR Full Speed. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern, I believe it was, on Friday afternoon that according to him, NASCAR Full Speed has cracked the top 10 list in Australia, New Zealand, and Norway. On top of that as well, it was still in the top 10 in the U.S. on the second day at number 7. Only dropping 2 positions where it was in the first day, which of course was in the number 5 position. This is really good to see that NASCAR Full Speed is continuing to grow outside of the United States. There's been in the top 10 in countries like Latvia, the UK, among other countries. And seeing NASCAR Full Speed be as popular as he is and how good of a show it really was, I really hope there is a second season for this show because I really enjoyed it. And again, seeing it still be in the top 10 in the U.S. after the first 2 days is really huge for the sport. Hopefully some of those people were able to tune in to the Bushlike Clash last night and were able to enjoy the event overall because honestly, I thought it was a really solid race, and I think that NASCAR Full Speed was a really good documentary. Hopefully there is a second season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Alex Lynn and Earl Bamber. As it was announced, I believe, on Friday afternoon that Alex Lynn and Earl Bamber will be returning to Chip Ganassi Racing in 2024 in IMSA and the World Endurance Championship, driving the number 2 car. Now, it's been announced that Renger van der Zand and Sebastian Bourdais are going to drive the 01 car, but Alex Lynn and Earl Bamber, of course, drove last year for Chip Ganassi Racing to quite a bit of success. I think Chip Ganassi Racing won a couple races in IMSA last season, and I think they nearly won the championship last year as well. And they're looking to continue a really strong year in 2024. It's a great decision to bring 2 drivers who've been extremely strong in IMSA, have won a lot of races, and I think that they're going to continue that success in the 2024 season. So I'm really happy for both those guys, and I'm glad to see that Alex Lynn and Earl Bamber, both of those guys will be returning to Chip Ganassi Racing in the 2024 IMSA season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Japanese Grand Prix. As it was announced on Friday early morning that the Japanese Grand Prix has been extended to 2029 and they will continue racing at the Suzuka circuit through the 2029 season. This is absolutely huge because one, it keeps a prime circuit that's been on the course for a very, very long time in Formula One through the 2029 season. And honestly, I think the racing at Suzuka generally is one of the more favorable racetracks when it comes to racing. I believe this year in 2024, the race is going to be a lot earlier in the year than previous years. And I think it was a good decision to move this race up a little bit earlier in the year. I think it's in the first 5 to 10 weeks of the Formula One season. So it was a really good decision to move the season, or at least move Suzuka to a little bit earlier in the season. And I'm glad they're going to be in Suzuka for a long time. Japan deserves to be on the schedule. And I think it's a really amazing and a fantastic decision overall to see that Suzuka will stay on the schedule and the Japanese Grand Prix will once again be returning in the 2024 season and staying for the long-term future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chase Elliott. As it was announced on Friday afternoon that Chase Elliott will be racing at New Smyrna Speedway on February 13th during the week of the Daytona 500, which is next week. This is really, really huge. He's going to be running another late model race. Chase Elliott has been running a lot more late model races over the course of the last couple of seasons, and will be going to New Smyrna Speedway in Florida. This will help him get a lot of experience behind the wheel, and hopefully he can use some of that experience from the late models to help him out during speed weeks. And I think it's really good because you're going to have huge crowds going out to New Smyrna, and a lot of people that probably wouldn't be going out to the event that actually will be showing up. I hope Chase Elliott can be really, really successful, show up, and contend for the win at New Smyrna in some late models. Glad to see, though, that he'll be behind the wheel of a late model at New Smyrna Speedway. Hopefully, he can contend for the victory overall. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Earl Barbin. As Bob Pockrass reported on Friday afternoon that Earl Barbin will be spotting for Jimmie Johnson in 2024 in the NASCAR Cup Series. This is really, really great to see because Earl Barbin had been Jimmie Johnson's spotter for many, many years. I think from about the late 2000s all the way up to, I believe, the 2018 or 2009 season, or actually the 2020 season when Jimmie Johnson officially announced retirement from the Cup Series. And now seeing Earl Barbin come back, because I think Earl Barbin's been working in the Xfinity Series or maybe with Hendrick Motorsports, something along those lines, if I'm not mistaken. And now I've got Earl Barbin that's coming back to work with Jimmie Johnson. And Earl Barbin is one of the best spotters in the history of the sport. So I really think Earl Barbin working with Jimmie Johnson once again, hopefully that can lead to Jimmie Johnson running extremely well and being fast and very, very competitive. I hope we can do a really good job with him this year. We'll see how Jimmie Johnson does his 9 select races, because remember, Jimmie Johnson's going to run a lot of races this year in 2024. But I am confident that Jimmie Johnson will be a lot more competitive now because he's got Earl Barbin being in the ear and spotting for him throughout the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Rolex 24 ratings. As according to Adam Stern, NBC got 792,000 viewers for the conclusion of the Rolex 24 at Daytona on Sunday. That is down from 986,000 viewers in 2023. That is a massive disappointment. Now, this does not translate from all the Peacock users, so there definitely were a lot of people that were on Peacock watching the whole entire event, hoping they were going to get commercial-free service, only to see commercials on Peacock as well. But honestly, seeing that massive drop in viewership is really, really disappointing. Considering that I thought the Rolex 24 this year, and I did a video talking about this when the race happened about a week ago, I thought the Rolex 24 was really, really good this year and had a really solid finish. Granted, the finish was a little bit kind of confusing at the end, but I thought the racing was really, really good. I think a big problem why the ratings were down is because of lack of promotion. You've got to promote the sport out to the fans, and unfortunately, a lot of people did not even know that there was going to be a race for the Rolex 24 unless you're a diehard fan like myself. You're not going to probably know exactly when the race is happening. So I feel like that they should have done a better job, that being IMSA, promoting the Rolex 24. Because again, I thought the Rolex 24 this year was really exciting and really fun to watch. So I'm disappointed that the ratings, unfortunately, are down. Am I shocked about this? Honestly, no. Am I disappointed, though? Yes, absolutely. I feel like they should have done a better job promoting. I don't really think they did an amazing job promoting, but that is just my honest opinion when it comes to promotion of the Rolex 24. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the NASCAR Mexico race that took place after the Bushlike clash. As we had a really crazy NASCAR Mexico race that took place with some really solid and good racing. And the driver that was able to win the NASCAR Mexico Series race was Daniel Suarez. While Daniel Suarez's beginning of the evening did not go well, where he unfortunately did not make the main event at the Bushlike clash, his night ended on a much higher note. And at least for trackhouse drivers, the last 12 months, they have won some pretty big events. Daniel Suarez winning the NASCAR Mexico race, Ross Chastain winning a national in Phoenix, Connor Zlich, a development driver who, of course, got the win in the Rolex 24, and Shane Van Gisbergen winning at the Chicago Street Course last year. And this is big for Daniel Suarez. The hope is, while like you said, he didn't make the Bushlike clash, hopefully he can bring this confidence from winning the NASCAR Mexico race and bring it into trying to go out there and win some races this year. And he's on the hot seat going into the year. He needs confidence. He needs to step up to the plate. Hopefully this NASCAR Mexico win can bring that confidence back into his system and he can go out there and win and keep his ride in the 99 because he's under pressure this year. He's got Zane Smith and Shane Van Gisbergen sitting there waiting in the wings for an opening there. We'll see if Daniel Suarez can step up to the plate and do much better with Trackhouse in the NASCAR Cup Series. But still, massive congratulations. One of the biggest wins of his career up to this point at the Los Angeles Coliseum. Congratulations to him on the win and the victory. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, we've talked about Shane Van Gisbergen quite a bit on this channel. Today we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen because he actually was at the Los Angeles Coliseum watching the Bushlike clash last night, basically being out there as a spectator and learning how to race the next-gen car. Remember, Shane Van Gisbergen is going to be driving the next-gen car in the Cup Series with Kaulig Racing this year. That was announced this past week. I believe it was on Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. That he'll be driving in 7 Cup Series races in the number 16 car for Kaulig Racing, which we all thought Matt DiBenedetto was going to be driving this year. Maybe there's a chance he still runs. But he's also going to run full-time in the Xfinity Series with Kaulig Racing as well. He's there to be a spectator at the LA Coliseum, but also getting there to learn how the next-gen car drives, especially if we do go to like a quarter-mile track next year in 2025, and if he's eligible to run the Bushlike Clash next season. It is exciting to see that he's out there enjoying the time and being at the LA Coliseum, even though the crowd did not look amazing, fantastic. It was amazing and great to see Shane Van Gisbergen be out at the racetrack at the Los Angeles Coliseum, and good to see him enjoying the Bushlike Clash last night. Is it really fun to see him out on the racetrack? And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kevin Harvick. Now, last night was Kevin Harvick's first time as a full-time commentator in the Fox Sports booth. And basically, Chris Knight on Twitter said that Kevin Harvick did an absolutely amazing job on the Fox Sports booth. And I 100% agree with Chris Knight here. I think Kevin Harvick in his first time, yes, he did have some jitters for sure and definitely made some mistakes, no doubt about it. But I think Kevin Harvick absolutely did a very good job. He actually was the best part of the booth, which I expected that coming into this year, and I thought that he was at least going to fix the booth in a pretty big way. But to be fair, it wasn't just Kevin Harvick that was better. Mike Joy was the best I've seen him in a couple years. It seemed like he had a lot more energy, and I think he did a really good job in the booth last night for someone who has not been as good the last few years because of age, unfortunately. I think Mike Joy showed a lot more energy, and I think him, Mike Joy, and Kevin Harvick had a lot of chemistry together. And even Clint Bowyer, even though he had a couple big gaffes, he wasn't that awful either. I think Clint Bowyer did an okay job because, of course, Clint and Kevin have been teammates as drivers. I really hope Kevin Harvick can be there to really help Clint Bowyer. Unfortunately, though, we got to talk about the rest of the stuff in the camera work because while Kevin Harvick was great in the booth and the booth was solid, the camera work was terrible last night. My goodness gracious, man. I don't know who's doing the camera work at Fox, but my God, the camera work was absolutely abysmal and absolutely atrocious last night. And whoever's doing that directing for the camera work needs to be fired, in my opinion, because that was unacceptable and ridiculous. Now, I get they probably had a skeleton crew because of the situation that we're going to talk about later in this episode. But man, they were at so many close shots. They missed Bubba Wallace basically spinning on the last lap. They missed a cool-down lap between Ross Chastain and Tyler Reddick. They missed a lot of certain things. And they just missed a lot of big moments that were happening and really exciting moments of this race. They've got to do better. And this has been a problem with Fox for the last couple of years as well. I think the booth got better with Kevin Harvick being there. I think there's got to be a lot of things changed with everything else surrounding it. Because in my opinion, it was not very fun to watch at times. And honestly, they need to change the broadcasting, the way they do it. Because in my opinion, they did not do a very, very good job when it came to certain rights of that broadcast. Again, the booth was great last night, but I think the other things were not as good and not as strong. I think that they absolutely could have done a better job when it comes to that. And now we're going to on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR Revenue. Now, Adam Stern put out an article in regards to the charter negotiations over the weekend on Friday. And according to Adam Stern, one of the big things he talked about was the NASCAR Revenue. According to Adam Stern, roughly 90% of the total amount of media revenue that NASCAR pays out across its 3 national series goes to Cup. I knew the Cup Series got a majority of that money, but to hear that 90% of that TV revenue is a pretty big shock in all honesty. I thought it was probably 75 to 80%, but to see that 90% is a number is an absolutely big number. To me, I like to see that number with the new negotiations. I like seeing that number kind of redistributed so that the Xfinity Series and Truck Series can get a little more money. But it's not absolutely all that surprising either because the Cup Series does put on the biggest show. But I really do hope that the Xfinity Series and Truck Series can get a little bit more of that money, especially the Xfinity Series, considering the Xfinity Series, in my opinion, puts on the best racing out there on a week-by-week basis. Yes, they are going to be going to the CW, and they are going to be getting a lot more money in the Xfinity Series than they were getting with this current TV deal that ends at the end of this year. I really do hope that the Xfinity Series does get a little more money when it comes to the deal. I want to see a little restructuring there to see that 90% of the revenue goes to the Cup Series is a pretty massive number. Nonetheless, so I find it very, very interesting and kind of weird to see, but not a massive shock or surprise overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going to on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Frankie Munz. Now, Frankie Munz put out a tweet on Friday afternoon indicating that he was in the Ford simulator over the week and was getting a lot of help from Cole Custer and indicated that he will be at Daytona International Speedway. Now, Frankie Munz has been teasing his 2024 plans over the course of the last couple of weeks. We had a lot of rumors that early in the offseason that he was going to go to RSS Racing, but that has been confirmed that that is not true. So we've been kind of wondering what is going on with Frankie Munz for the 2024 season. Well, there's a chance he will be potentially in an ARCA race, but he did confirm in a post a couple weeks ago that he will actually be at Daytona International Speedway in a couple weeks from now. Whether it be the Xfinity Series or the ARCA Series is to be determined. I will tell you this, I think more than likely it's going to be ARCA than the Xfinity Series. My prediction is Retta Jones Racing. Look, he drove for Retta Jones last year, had some solid performances with the team, and to be fair, nearly finished in the top 10 in his ARCA debut, and was very, very impressive at points throughout the 2023 season. Now, I don't think he's going to be full-time in ARCA. I think there's a chance in 2024 that he's going to be racing part-time, whether that is with Thorsport Racing in the Truck Series, whether it is with RSS Racing, or maybe SS Greenlight Racing, perhaps. That could be definitely an interesting move for him in his career if he was to go to a team like SS Greenlight, because I know he wants to go Xfinity Series or Truck Racing. He said that publicly last year. I think it's either going to be in the Truck Series or the Xfinity Series at some point he'll run, but I think he'll also run quite a few ARCA races because you got to have sponsorship funding, and he had a lot of struggles and issues with sponsorship and funding last year. I really hope Frankie does get the race though in 2024 the whole entire year, but it's good to see that he'll at least be at Daytona. It might be a race-by-race case situation where he's only racing like 1 week and then maybe he's not racing the next week, especially if he doesn't bring the sponsorship and funding. But nonetheless, it's good to see that Frankie's getting experience in the simulator, and hopefully in the not-so-distant future, we'll hear about Frankie Munz's plans and where he'll be headed in the 2024 season. And now we're going to on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Now, there were a lot of drivers that were not happy with each other after the NASCAR Cup Series race for the Busch Clash, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was one of them. He was mad at 2 drivers. First, during the halfway break of the race, he apparently got out of his car and went into John Hunter Nemechek's window net and took the window net down and had conversations with John Hunter Nemechek. Then about halfway through the race, about 80 or 85 laps in, during when a lot of the chaos happened during the Bushlike clash, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. got up really into it with Michael McDowell, and there was contact on the front stretch and the back stretch as well. Now, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. talked about this incident and said it was unnecessary, and really there was no necessary point of having contact with me and getting into it with drivers. Well, I wonder if there's going to be any penalties coming Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s way, maybe, considering he got out of his car and you were not supposed to during the 10-minute break. Why we had the 10-minute break with the Machine Gun Kelly concert being canceled, I really have no idea, to be honest. But I think that Ricky Stenhouse Jr., I understand that he had a great year last year. But you don't need to be getting into feuds and conflicts with drivers like Michael McDowell, considering you both made the playoffs last year, both had really strong years, and for both of them to make the main event was really good to see. I don't think Stenhouse made the main event last year. I could be wrong on that. If I'm wrong, correct me in the comments. But still, I really don't know why Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was pissed off on Michael McDowell and John Hunter Nemechek. It's kind of interesting to watch. Maybe these two will get in a rivalry. Maybe both those guys are bound for a playoff spot this year if they're able to make the playoffs. It's interesting to see, though, that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was not very happy with both those drivers, and I wonder if anything will come from it. I think McDowell talked to reporters about his situation and kind of shrugged it off, it seemed like. But to me, I'm not surprised or shocked to see Stenhouse mad, because Stenhouse seems like he kind of gets mad at times with a lot of different drivers. Am I shocked he's mad? No, I'm really not shocked that he was mad overall, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Andretti. Now, we talked about this on the channel on Friday, but on Wednesday, Andretti was denied access to joining Formula One. The FOM, not the FIA, because the FIA had approved them, but the FOM released a statement and basically said the reasons behind Andretti not coming in, said they were not going to bring a lot of value, said that they were planning for 2025, not 2026. They were basically going to be a customer team, among other things, which a lot of people, including myself, were not very happy about it. Now, Andretti has basically sent a rebuttal and basically corrected two things that were said. They responded to F1's denial. The first big thing was they were not planning to jump into Formula One in 2025. The all-time goal was to get into Formula One in 2026. The second thing is that they were not aware of the invite that they received, and apparently that invite, according to Jenna Fryer, had actually been in a junk folder. So it was sent apparently by someone who works at the FOM and not one of the higher ups. So no one at Andretti even knew, and they apparently are still planning to work on this car even though they've not been approved. Let's get back to that big point. I kind of knew that they weren't going to be coming in 2025. I have no idea why the FOM was trying to indicate that Andretti was going to go into Formula One in 2025. They were waiting until 2026 with the new regulations, because if they were planning to go in 2025, it would have made absolutely no sense with new regulations coming in 2026. I think the FOM was looking for any sort of excuse, and obviously the biggest reason that they were denied to come into Formula One is because of money. And Andretti basically jumped through all the hoops, and they were going to pay the $200 million fee anyways, which would have given $20 million to all 10 teams currently in Formula One. And it would have made insane much amount of difference when it comes to the much they receive. They were doing everything they needed to do. They were following the rules. I think a lot of stuff was BS, and I think Andretti absolutely did a really good job handling the situation, and I hope they eventually do come to Formula One. I hope they go to the courts. If not, come to NASCAR. Invest in Aspire Motorsports and grow that group. But in all seriousness and all honesty, I think it's a load of BS. I think it's absolutely ridiculous how everything got handled in this situation. And to me, I think the FOM, because the FIA have got no problem in this situation with, the FOM absolutely screwed Andretti. I don't want to see people defending them. I had to basically call out somebody on Twitter for defending the move for Andretti wouldn't bring value, which is a load of BS, considering Andretti has won a lot of big events. They've won the Indy 500. They've won, of course, the Daytona 500. Mario has. And, of course, Michael's won 42 kart races, IndyCar races, and, of course, an IndyCar championship in 93. I really hope they do get to Formula One, because they absolutely deserve to be in Formula One more than some of these teams and some of these organizations. I hope they do, in fact, eventually end up getting into Formula One. They deserve to be there over some teams. If not, though, it is what it is at this point. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tyler Reddick versus Ross Chastain. Now, if you watched the end of the Bushlike clash last night, you saw the tension between Tyler Reddick and Ross Chastain. coming to the end of the race on the white flag of the event, basically going into turn number 1 or coming down the front stretch, Bubba also got spun out by Kyle Larson, which we're going to talk about later in this episode. And Chastain apparently got bumped really, really hard by Tyler Reddick. During the cooldown lap, Tyler Reddick and Ross Chastain were not very happy with each other, and I believe Ross Chastain forced Tyler Reddick up into the outside wall. Now, after the race concluded, Tyler Reddick had talked to Ty Norris about a situation. There were no shoving match. There were no words exchanged. Basically, they just talked it out, and things are very, very calm, cool, and collective. Ross Chastain also spoke to the media as well, told Bob Parker saying that they smiled at each other, and they're not really mad at each other about the situation. And I think Tyler Reddick kind of said, why are you doing what you did? It's a little ridiculous, but he also was not really mad at Ross Chastain for the situation because they're both are really good buddies and friends. Look, I feel like that's Ross Chastain a little bit of a right to be upset that Reddick moved him up, but at the same time, Ross Chastain had issues with other drivers like Michael McDowell throughout the evening and through the night, and he was having a little bit of issues there because kind of a little bit of wrecking ball throughout the evening, and of course caused one of the cautions that unfortunately hurt Ty Gibbs a little bit. It's interesting to see that both those drivers, and again, Tyler Reddick and Ross Chastain really never had issues on the racetrack. In fact, they've been pretty friendly to each other over the last 5 to 10 years. You go back to Phoenix a few years ago in 2022, where they were both for battling really hard to try to beat Chase Briscoe to his first career win. They both shook each other's hand, and they basically were not mad at each other about it. Again, I don't think that this will lead to anything. It's just interesting to see that Tyler Reddick and Ross Chastain weren't really mad at each other, and probably the most common of any of the little rivalry things that happened over the weekend. So nonetheless, interesting to see that not really much coming out of it, though it's interesting to see that Tyler Reddick and Ross Chastain did in fact have some issues out on the racetrack during the Bushlike clash. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Bushlike clash once again. Now, if you already know at this point, the Bushlike clash did in fact end up happening yesterday evening. They decided, unprecedentedly, to go ahead and move the race up to last night due to a big storm that is coming into the Los Angeles area. And they just made the decision to move it to Saturday. Now, NASCAR basically acknowledged to the media and addressed the media on Saturday afternoon, and Steve O'Donnell basically said they knew they were going to have a bad day on TV ratings, and it was going to be a loss of money overall for NASCAR in this situation as well. But they thought about the fan safety and the driver safety as well. Now, Kyle Busch called the move genius, and he was one of the few people that really absolutely praised it. And honestly, there was not a driver that was against the move. In fact, not only were drivers happy about the move, but many media members, many crew chiefs. Denny Hamlin was really happy about it. I saw that Chase Elliot called it one of the best moves that we've seen in the industry over the course of the last couple of years. Kyle Larson thought the move was really, really good. And I think you ask most drivers, they're very happy about the move. And NASCAR has already acknowledged that they are going to be giving refunds to people that bought tickets that were originally planning to go to the event Sunday. Now, why did NASCAR make this move? Like I mentioned a second ago, there's massive storms that are currently hitting Los Angeles at the moment. Currently thinking about everyone that's being affected by the weather over there. And it was projected that this rainstorm that's coming through Los Angeles was going to happen on all the way up until I think Wednesday or Thursday. And the biggest thing to think about is the Daytona 500 is basically 2 weeks from today or yesterday when you're watching this. So that's a pretty big reason why they decided to say, yep, we're going to go ahead and have it tonight, because they were either going to have the race tonight where fans were going to be allowed in for free. So you got to watch a free NASCAR Cup Series race at the Bushlike Clash, or you weren't going to have a race at all, and everything was going to have to get refunded, everyone was going to have to get out of Dodge, and we'd be waiting 4 or 5 days, which was not going to be reasonable, especially with Daytona being right around the corner, and you got to get prepped up for Daytona. To me, I think NASCAR made the best of a really bad situation. I don't think this is something that you'll see common anymore. I think this is one of those unprecedented situations. Usually NASCAR waits out these kind of things. But to me, I think NASCAR made a really strong and a really good decision. And I think it was the best decision that NASCAR could have made in regards to the situation that they were currently in at the time. I think it was a very good decision on NASCAR's end. Again, they're refunding and everyone got in for free. So I think it was a really good decision on NASCAR's end overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Southern California. According to Adam Stern, NASCAR has explored a dozen concepts of places to possibly race at in Southern California in the future, but they have not found anything currently at the moment in regards to Southern California. This relates to a couple big things. One, we're going to talk about Auto Club Speedway, but it was confirmed that Auto Club Speedway will not be returning in 2025. And there's been a lot of rumors of the Bushlike Clash may not be returning to the Los Angeles Coliseum in 2025. And NASCAR does want to stay in that Southern California market going into the future long term. Why? Well, the Southern California market is one of the biggest markets in the United States. In fact, I think it's like the third or fourth biggest U.S. market. So NASCAR wants to stay fresh in that U.S. market, in the L.A. market, and stay in that area. Now, obviously, like I mentioned, there's been a lot of rumors that the L.A. Coliseum is not going to be back in 2025. So what do you do to stay in Southern California? Because you're not going to have Auto Club in 2025, and you're probably not going to be staying in Los Angeles unless NASCAR decides to stay in L.A. at the last minute. Well, you do have a couple options on the table. You could go to Irwindale Speedway. You could go there for sure. Irwindale Speedway, they do need to make some upgrades for sure, but probably not as much as a track like Auto Club they're going to need. So you could go to Irwindale Speedway, another short track. It could be a track that would host an opening event. You could have rainstorms like we dealt with this time around, but it's kind of unprecedented, the rainstorms that end up taking place. You could go to Long Beach, but you got to think about IndyCar and IMSA. They got the IndyCar races going to happen there. Not too much after the event, though I will say it's probably not going to be as much of an issue as people realize this. I would love to see Long Beach come on the schedule and be in that area, but honestly, I think that would be a really solid option. I think you have to go to either Irwindale or Long Beach or somewhere else. I don't know what other tracks are kind of in that area of Los Angeles. If you live in that area, let me know what tracks I didn't mention here. That would be really good options. I really hope they do stay in the Southern California market because, again, it's a huge TV ratings win. It's a very competitive market, though. Los Angeles is one of the biggest areas in the country. And, again, I've known that NASCAR is trying to stay in that market currently at the moment, and they're trying to figure it out. It's definitely interesting for sure, and it's something that we're going to have to follow over time. We'll see what happens, and we'll see how things play out. Hopefully NASCAR can find a track to go to in the future and stay in that current market going into the long-term future. We'll see how things play out, and we'll see how things shake out going into the long and the foreseeable future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson versus Bubba Wallace. Now, if you watched the Bushlike Clash last night, you probably saw the feud between Kyle Larson and Bubba Wallace, which really wasn't a feud. So let's go back to the restart with about 10 laps to go in the race. Ty Gibbs is really battling hard with Joey Logano, forces Joey Logano up the racetrack, and Denny Hamlin's able to get the race lead. Ty Gibbs loses a ton of positions in ground and starts losing a ton of positions in the last couple of laps. And then going into the final turn, coming to what was at the point the white flag, Denny Hamlin had the lead, and then Ty Gibbs got spun out by Kyle Larson. What a lot of people didn't realize is Bubba Wallace had actually gotten to the back of Kyle Larson multiple different times, according to Kyle Larson, throughout the race. And then we get to the final restart of the event where we got into overtime, and basically Kyle Larson went back to pay back Bubba Wallace, was not meaning to intentionally spin him out, but got in the back of Bubba Wallace and spun him out during the end of the race, and NASCAR did not throw the caution. They were wanting to get out of Dodge, which I completely understand. I think it was an acceptable move to try to get out of Dodge. Look, I think that it's interesting to see, and even Kyle Larson actually responded to the situation and basically said he wasn't trying to spin Bubba. He was basically just wanting to get back because he got spun by Bubba 3 times. Now, everyone wants to know this. Kyle Larson and Bubba Wallace do have a little bit of history. Let's go all the way back to 2022. Remember Las Vegas in the fall? Kyle Larson maybe was wanting to get payback from that a few years ago, which again, if he did that to Bubba Wallace, that's not the worst retaliation I've ever seen, considering the way that Bubba retaliated against Kyle was a lot worse than the way the other situation happened. And I think most people would agree that even though Bubba Wallace had every right to be upset in that situation, he shouldn't have rear Kyle Larson down the straightaway, and I think he should have been suspended for that race, the next race, and probably for the rest of the season at this point for what he ended up doing. This is an expendable act, and hopefully Bubba and Kyle can talk about a situation, and hopefully this thing does not turn into a bigger situation than I think people realize. I don't think it's that big of a situation. I don't think it's going to turn into anything crazy, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does. It would be kind of interesting to see Kyle Larson and Bubba Wallace have a little bit of rivalry. They have been friends in the past. They've raced against each other for many, many years, so they know how to race against each other. I really would love to see these two continue their ways. I hope they get to figure this out. Bubba didn't seem too mad at Larson for the situation, and again, at least Larson admitted that he ran into him, but like I said, I don't think that Kyle Larson intentionally meant to wreck Bubba Wallace. I don't think it was intentional, and I don't think he intentionally meant to wreck Bubba Wallace in that situation. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next major story in today's episode as we're talking about Auto Club Speedway. Now, there's been a lot of talks and conversations surrounding the future of Auto Club Speedway and whether or not this track is going to be coming back anytime soon or not. Well, it was confirmed over this weekend on Friday that Auto Club Speedway, in fact, will not be ready by 2025, and they will not be returning for the 2025 season. According to Adam Stern, with a build time of 12 to 18 months, Dave Allen, who is the president of Auto Club or the future Next Gen California, doesn't see this project as just a one-year absence from racing, meaning that they will not be racing in 2025, meaning the earliest that Auto Club Speedway could potentially come back is 2026. But that is not guaranteed. So there is a chance that possibly we may just not be waiting for 2025. We also might be waiting for 2026 and also 2027 as well. We may be waiting for a very long time for this track to return. And it is a really great shame, but it's kind of understandable because obviously there's been a lot of deconstruction of the racetrack, but they have kept a little bit of the racetrack that is still available because they're still planning to have this track built. Now, why is this track not done, or has there been no construction done of this track at this point? Well, there are a couple big reasons. One, the economy is a major factor. If you've been paying attention to the economy over the course of the last couple of years, you know the economy is not in the greatest shape currently at the moment. Because remember, they delayed this coming out. We had the pandemic that came into play, among other things that unfortunately affected it. And that sadly is a big reason why this hasn't really gotten down. It's a shame they had to do this, but of course NASCAR sold off a lot of the land. It was $555 million is what they sold for, which is a big reason why they end up selling in the first place, because so they can get a lot of money. I wouldn't be surprised or shocked though if this track doesn't come back, which we'll get into that in a second here. I really want to see this short track project be able to get completed though by 2026. I'm holding out a little hope they do have it happen, because I want to see this short track end up happening, because if this short track can happen, this could potentially be the season finale. I think this is NASCAR's long-term goal, is to have Los Angeles be the season finale for the sport and stay in that Southern California market. Because like I mentioned earlier with Southern California, this is one of the biggest markets in the United States. And I think NASCAR does want to stay in the Southern California market. I would think they really, really do. I don't think they want to be going to Phoenix anymore. We already know that Phoenix is not the most exciting racetrack, and I think there's a good chance that Phoenix Raceway may or may not be the last time the Phoenix hosts season finale, even though there is a chance it could come back in 2025. Now getting to my talks. Do I think Auto Club Speedway will ever return? Honestly, I don't know. I think the future is very bleak and very, very uncertain. I do want it to return, because I think Auto Club Speedway would be really, really great for the sport, even as a short track. We know that NASCAR still got issues with the short track package, but I know that NASCAR is currently working on it. I know that NASCAR is trying to fix the issues, and they're trying to resolve the problems when it does come to the short track package. But honestly, I think it's very uncertain, and I'm not entirely sure if they're going to come back. I think eventually, if they don't get any progress done, at least at some point in 2024, where at least they're constructing some things, I wouldn't be surprised if we're waiting until 2027. And that's really, really unfortunate, and that's a pretty big shame. Because in my opinion, this track deserves to be on the schedule 100%. And I understand why they made the move. I wish they would have stayed on the 2-mile track, but they were going to have to repave it eventually. It's no secret they were going to have to repave it, because the track had been on the original service since 1997. So they were going to have to make a decision if they were going to do the repave, and the racing may not have been as good, even though the next gen car has raced exceptional at every bigger oval with the intermediate package. I just didn't think that there was a chance that they were going to have to repave regardless, and maybe the racing was not going to be as good. It's a shame they had to make the decision they made, but it is what it is. And honestly, I don't think they're coming back anytime soon. I think the earliest will be 2026, and I think if lucky, 2026 will be very, very generous. as of now, we know we're not going to be back at Auto Club in 2025. It's disappointing, but it's not surprising or shocking. We keep getting delayed longer, and if they don't have any construction, I think it could be a lot longer than that. We'll see how things play out, and we'll see if they do eventually make a return to Auto Club. But again, as of right now, I think the earliest is going to be 2026. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Joey Logano versus Ty Gibbs. Now, if you watched the Bushlike Clash over the weekend, you saw the feud between Joey Logano and Ty Gibbs. The feud started about 10 laps to go in the race going into the final restart. Michael McDowell and Ross Chastain had brought out that caution. Ty Gibbs actually running away with this race and had this race pretty much in the bag. On one of the late race restarts, Ty Gibbs had the race lead, unfortunately overshot the corner and forced Joey Logano up the racetrack, and Logano got into the outside wall. Ty Gibbs dropped back to second, and Joey Logano lost a ton of positions. Then Ty Gibbs faded back and basically ended up getting spun out by Kyle Larson after Bubba Wallace got in the back of Kyle Larson, and there was contact, and unfortunately, like I mentioned, Ty Gibbs went around. Ty Gibbs, of course, is going back to his hauler and basically was going to go back in there, and Joey Logano then went to confront him. Ty Gibbs then basically told Joey, hey, come here, let's go inside the hauler and talk. Joey grabs him by the shirt, grabs him by the collarbone, and basically they grabs each other, and they basically start having a match, basically not a shoving match or anything, but words were exchanged between both of them, and Ty Gibbs basically said, I've seen this before all my life, we know how you are, and Joey says, oh, remember, yeah, I've seen this all in my life as a race car driver. And basically, they had words of exchange, and they were not very happy each other after that. Now, these two have already had a little bit of history. You go back to Martinsville last year. Both of them had contact on the racetrack. Joey Logano ran in the back of Ty Gibbs and spun Ty Gibbs out in the middle portion of the event. And Denny Hamlin, if you saw the NBC, the Netflix show, you saw that Denny Hamlin was very unhappy with Joey Logano after that incident. There was some audio that surfaced before that, but on the Netflix show, you saw Denny Hamlin was not very happy about that. Now, look, Ty Gibbs then basically responded, basically saying that Joey's done this kind of stuff before. It's kind of interesting watching all this stuff play out, considering the fact that Joey Logano, many years ago, not even that long ago, as a matter of fact, was in the same position that Ty Gibbs was in. Considering that Joey Logano just about 10 years ago was around the same age that Ty is. Ty Gibbs is only 21 years old. And I think Ty Gibbs is a little bit also frustrated how the night went for him. And I get Logano being upset and frustrated because Ty, to be fair, did use Joey Logano up. But I think more people are on Ty Gibbs' side than Joey Logano's side because they've seen because Joey really has no room to talk when it comes to being over-aggressive and getting ran into in those situations. But hey, if these guys are both racing against each other throughout the year, I think this rivalry is going to be fun and really, really exciting because I think that this year, both these guys are going to be up front a lot more. I think that Ty Gibbs has really shown a lot of maturity as a race car driver, and he was being the more mature one, at least in the situation where he's trying to get Joey into the hauler and talk to him, and Joey's like, nah, let's just have all the people here and covering it. It'd been cool to see if Netflix is there and see all this stuff play out. But in all honesty, in all seriousness, I get Joey Logano being frustrated, upset 100%, considering he's a veteran of the sport now. He's 33 years old. But it's kind of crazy for, like I said, for Joey Logano, who you had issues with the veterans of the sport at the time when he was younger. Guys like Tony Stewart, even Denny Hamlin, even guys like Ryan Newman were not happy with him at the time. Even I think Kurt Busch has gotten to beef with him maybe in the past. And a lot of our drivers like Kyle Busch also have gotten into fist fights and matches with Joey Logano as well. So Ty Gibbs is in the same position that Joey was. And I think that Ty Gibbs and Logano, I want to see this rivalry, man. I want to see this continue because I think both these guys, this rivalry could be really huge to the sport and a massive story to follow. Two drivers that are not liked by a lot of the fans because Joey Logano is probably the most hated driver, one of the more hated drivers of the sport. Do I think that honor still goes to Denny Hamlin, even though he beat your favorite driver this weekend. But Joey Logano and Ty Gibbs are two of the most hated drivers in the sport. And I want to see the rivalry continue. I think these guys are going to put on a really good show when it comes to that, and I think it's going to be fun to follow both these guys throughout the year because they're two of the best drivers. I think that Joey Logano is going to win a lot of races in his career, but I also think Ty Gibbs is too. And I wouldn't be surprised or shocked if Ty Gibbs comes out here and wins a lot of races throughout the season. I think Joey may be a little jealous of that at this point. I think he sees how good Ty is. And I think Ty Gibbs has been showing a lot of improvement. I know that Ty has ruffled a lot of feathers over the years, but I think he's repaired that reputation in some ways. And I think that he had a right to be a little bit frustrated with Joe Logano for grabbing him by the shoulder. We'll see if these two continue having issues going forward into the future, but it's interesting to see that these guys had a feud already, and we just started the season. Will it continue throughout the year? Yes. Will it happen next couple weeks? No, because they're super speedway races. I think the first time these guys will have more confrontation might be at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and I want to see it continue definitely at Las Vegas Motor Speedway for sure. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Mexico City and Guadalajara. There's been a lot of talk and conversation about the future of the Bushlike Clash in the Los Angeles Coliseum and whether or not they're going to be returning to the LA Coliseum or not. And there definitely is a chance they could return, even though they're past their 3-year contract, they could return to the LA Coliseum. But according to Athletic and Adam Stern, Mexico City and Guadalajara are two potential locations. As Adam Stern mentions, taking the Clash to Mexico City or Guadalajara is on NASCAR's radar, perhaps as soon as next year, according to industry sources. Now, there was another Adam Stern article that came out from basically Steve O'Donnell, kind of confirming, saying, we have explored Mexico, but that's not the only location that we are exploring. Now, it is no secret that NASCAR has been talking about going in basically international over the course of the last couple of years. We talked about this on a channel like not even I think a week or two ago that we've been getting closer and closer to potentially hosting an international race. And there were plans to host an international race in Canada up in Montreal for 2024. They were very, very close to having Montreal or Circuit Gilles Villeneuve on the schedule, which of course was a track that NASCAR did host Xfinity Series races from 2007 to 2012 before that race got moved to Mid-Ohio starting in the 2013 season. Now the Xfinity Series, of course, no longer races at Mid-Ohio. In fact, no NASCAR Series is racing at Mid-Ohio this year. As for potentially racing in Mexico, I would absolutely love it. And I think that there's a chance it could go to a road course for sure, maybe at the Autodrome Hernando Rodriguez track. But if they're talking about doing the Clash, they're going to have to go to a short track. I've seen people suggest El Dorado Speedway as a potential possibility. I think El Dorado's kind of near that Mexico City area. But there's also, I think, some Coliseum-like tracks in Mexico City as well that they absolutely could go to host a race. But I think there's a really strong chance of possibility of looking at the international side of things. Yeah, they absolutely could go international, and they could go racing in Mexico. And I think it'd be really, really good. There is a really huge demographic of people from Mexico that do watch this sport. You have a lot of people that from there that do watch. And you also got Daniel Suarez, a driver that they root for, who's come from Mexico City. So I think it would be huge if they went to Guadalajara or Mexico City. That would be a huge deal. And the big question will be what happens to Kyle Busch. So we all know what happened about a year ago at this point where Kyle Busch was arrested for a situation. As for the future of the Clash, if they don't go to Mexico City, where could they go? Because I think there's a lot of talk about where they could take this event in the long-term future. You think about some areas. They could bring it back to Daytona. That is a possibility, but honestly, no one showed up. They could do the Battle of the Beach. That could be an option as well, where they had the Battle Beach there for many, many years. And I think bringing back the backstretch temporary grandstands would be a really good idea. If you want to incorporate a short track, that'd be a great way to do it. I've seen some people even suggest Charlotte Motor Speedway. And I would love to see Charlotte host it, but the problem is you got to look at the weather. Granted, sometimes the weather can be really good at Charlotte during this time, but the weather historically at Charlotte Motor Speedway has been a little bit colder during this time. So I don't think Charlotte would be the biggest possibility. You would have to do this track most likely either in the south where it's a little warmer during the time, so maybe like in Texas, maybe like in a football stadium, maybe somewhere like a different market, maybe going up to Washington perhaps and like inside a dome perhaps, could be an option. I don't really know at this point. Maybe going to Denver and doing it inside its dome. I don't know at this point, but again, talking about Mexico being a potential candidacy as a possibility, yeah, I would absolutely love it. I'd like to expand outside of the United States and go somewhere internationally, whether it is as a points-paying race or if it basically is as an exhibition event. I think it'd be a great start for the sport. Most motorsports are expanding outside the United States, and they're going to different countries. We, of course, know the basically football, the NFL, they've expanded recently to England, even Mexico, and even France as well. You think about other sports like WWE's been expanding outside. You've got that LA Liga series that's been coming out. You've got a lot of series that have been expanding and moving to different parts of the country and different parts of the world. Globalization. Remember, the Garage 86 entry opened up these possibilities by going to France and racing in Garage 86. Basically going to Le Mans and competing, and did pretty well, all things considered, and had a chance to get top 30 before mechanical issues came into play. I want to see this happen. I want to see NASCAR go outside the United States. I want to see him go to Canada, maybe go to Montreal. So I think the race would be great there. And I would absolutely love to see him go to Mexico City. Do I think it happens in 2025? Absolutely. I think there's a great chance it happens. I think the fact that there are discussions and possibilities that they are having right now, a lot of times the NASCAR's having discussions about doing things. A lot of times they end up panning out, and a lot of times they do end up happening. So yes, I think there is a very strong chance and a realistic possibility that going into the 2025 year, we're going to be racing in Mexico for the first time in a long time, because the Xfinity Series raced in Mexico City from 2005 to 2008. So I think there's a really strong chance and possibility that in 2025, we'll be racing in Mexico. It'll be fun to see how things play out and see how things go down when it comes to that. So that is good for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links below that, and comment below your thoughts below on today's episode. Do you think NASCAR will expand to Mexico City? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Joey Logano and Ty Gibbs feud? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we're likely going to have either the Truck Series winner predictions or the Truck Series driver lineup for 2024 dropping. And we got a lot of great content dropping throughout this week as we're getting closer to the Daytona 500. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.